Hello everybody, Master here, and welcome back to another video. So Blizzard added a new feature coming to patch 9.2.5 or sometime next patch. That's going to be interesting to see. And I'm going to show you guys of what's coming. So look at this. So cross faction is coming for next patch. And this is really interesting. So here's the development preview for cross faction instance. I'm going to show you guys what they mean. So for years now, many players have questioned whether the rules restrict communication and cooperation between Alliance and Horde need to be absolved. The faction divided could keep close friends from playing together or cause playing to feel that their faction leaves them with far fewer opponents to pursue their favorite group content. But these where I left off. Pursues to pursue their favorite group content, but these downsides have long been just tifted in order to preserve a central element of the Warcraft universe. It all begins with a game titled Warcraft, Orcs and Human, right? But to quote a one-time war chief of the Horde, times change. I am pleased to announce that we are working on adding the ability for Alliance and Horde players to form pre-made parties together for dungeon raids and raided PvP. There have been 2 decades worth of code and content crafted with the explanation that parties can only have players of a single faction, and while we want to make this feature available as soon as possible, the extent of the change means that it could be ready in time for the upcoming Eternity Ends content update. Instead, we are planning to test and release it as part of a subsequent 9.2.5 update. We are eager to hear your feedback about the details we're sharing today and on the details of our implementation when this feature becomes available to the public test realm, following the release of Eternity's End. In crafting the results of this new feature, we were guided by 2 goals. Focus on organize instead gameplay. Dungeon raids and raided PvP have been at the center of the most complicating arguments of relaxing the faction divide. This is the content that by definition requires a pre-made group, and those social barriers will have the greatest negative impact on people's abilities to access these experiences on their preferred terms. Make this option in feature as much as possible. In terms of in-world fiction and player preferences, there are decades of ambiguity to overcome, while we are excited to offer players the choice to reach across the faction divide and cooperate to overcome common foes. We know that there are many who will react rarely to this change, and we don't want to override those preferences. This is about increasing options for players. These guidelines led us the following system. Players will be able to directly invite members of the opposite faction to a party if you have the battletag or real ID friendship, or if you're the members of a cross-faction WoW community. Pre-made groups in the group finder listing for Mythic Dungeons raids or raided arenas/RBGs will be open to applicants of both factions, though the group leader may choose to restrict the listing to same faction applicants if they so choose. Guilds will remain a single faction, and random match-made activities like heroic dungeons, skirmishes, or random battlegrounds will all remain same faction, both because there is less faction divine presence around random groups and to avoid compensating the operant nature of the feature of feature by randomly placing a queuing orc in a group with a night elf. Once in a party together, members of the opposite faction will remain unfriendly while in the outdoor world and fully hostile in war mode as they do today, though they will be able to communicate through party chat upon entering a dungeon raid or raided PvP match. However, all members will be friendly and be able to assist each other in combat, trade loot on shared achievements, and otherwise fully cooperate the same way members of the same faction have always been able to. A major goal to announcing this feature in advance is to make sure we're capturing all the expectations and requirements for this to be a smooth experience. A group waiting doing Mythic Plus keys or chasing higher PvP rating should be able to operate similarly whether they're in the same faction or cross-faction group. This functionality will also apply to legacy instances and available at all levels, though there will be several older instances that cross-faction parties cannot enter, at least for now. Battle of Desire, Trial of the Crusader, as considerable, remember the gunship battle, and a handful of other that similarly have extensive factions specific components that will have to be reworked to support cross-faction parties. There are likely those who have been reading so far with Unleash worried that this is a chipping away at a foundational principle of Warcraft. At BlizzCon in 2019, when an attendant asked about cross-faction play, we responded that at the time, the Alliance and Horde separation is a pillar of what World of Warcraft, but upon reflection, that is oversimplification. Alliance and Horde identity is what is fundamental to Warcraft, and while all times that identity has been one of division and open conflict, we've seen Alliance and Horde finding common ground and working together ever since Warcraft 3. Notably including the last time a Warcraft chapter was named Eternity's End, and the instance of cooperation in World of Warcraft itself are too numerous to count. Oh, hang on. We're hopeful that these changes will serve to actually strengthen a faction identity by allowing more players to play the faction whose values and ethics and characters they find more compelling, rather than feeling forced to choose between their personal preferences and the ability to play with friends. Following the events of Battle of Azeroth, the Alliance and Horde are poised in an uneasy image. The faction still stands apart, and even as some of the leaders cooperate in Shadowlands, countless members of each faction will neither forgive nor forget the wartime actions of the other. For every Jaina, there is a Jen, and they seem unlikely to change anytime soon, but why shouldn't players be able to make that choice for themselves, especially in cooperating settings where the story resolves around coming together to overcome dire threats? We look forward to hearing your thoughts and feedback on this feature, both now and once it live for testing on 9.2.5 PTR. We'll see you in Azeroth. So, what that means is that I just read they are finally adding a cross faction where Horde players can finally play with the Alliance players for the very first time in 9.2.5 and then the upcoming patch. So that'd be really cool in the idea. Here's on and WoWHead. Blizzard has announced that cross-faction dungeons, raids, and PvP are coming to patch 9.2.5. Somewhere guild remain a single top faction. Random matchmaking activities will also remain faction. So I already went over this, but I'm going to give you guys a summary though. So guilds will remain single faction. Random matchmaking activities will also remain the same faction. All raids, dungeons, and rated PvP will cross faction, bearing some exception raids will with faction specific comments, e.g. battle villages or ice consider. And yeah, group finder will be cross faction. However, the group leader may choose to restrict the same faction if they wish. You can directly invite members of the opposite faction as to a party with a battletag, or if you're part of the cross faction WoW community. And I already read all this, so don't need to read all about that. Here's it. Okay, MMOChampion, that's nothing new. But here is an IGN cross-faction interview with Ian Hazakakis. IGN posted an interview yesterday with Ian Hazakakis that shed a little more light on the new cross-faction grouping announcement coming in patch 9.2.5 in the near future. Some interesting information includes the decision to make this change now came about as part of a larger reaximation of World of Warcraft foundations that started 9.1.5. The team has been revisiting community requested things they have said no in the past. Your faction is something you are born into. It's not to choose you make. It's assigned based on race, and the team wants to stray away from the idea that because you are born an elf, you must hate trolls, and nothing that can change that mentally. Communications has evolved a lot since WoW was created. People from communities outside the game and not necessarily through the faction anymore. They realized that they reached a tipping point a while ago, but were stubborn and traditionalist, and the thought of uprooting this foundational pillar was scary. For now, they are not ready. For now, they are not ready to dissolve factions and let a bunch of humans run around Orgrimmar. The scope of this change is a massive technical undertaking. They eventually want you to be able to access all legacy content, dungeons, and raids so you can farm transmog with friends, but it'll take more time to address instances such as Battle of the Czar. There probably won't be any story acknowledgement about the gameplay change since the factions are currently in an armor go. It's unlikely they will ever do an all-consuming faction conflict expansion again, but stick to wider ranges of persimmons on the divide through characters such as the survivors of Telesur, Jane Greyman, and the Forsaken. They want players to decide themselves how they think about the opposite factions. Ian says the team is open to expanding the feature in the future, including things like cross-faction guilds. They want to start conservatively and grow it from there. The foundation pillar of Warcraft has always been advanced and not necessarily the war between the factions. It has often acknowledged that we have more in common than what separates us. So that's more of the IGN from Ian Hazakakis, the director of World of Warcraft. But there is more in the IGN. So here is an WoWHead. Here we go. Alright, in an interview with IGN game director Ian Hazakakis shared his thoughts on newly announced plan to enable cross-faction grouping for dungeon raids and PvP in Shadowlands, patch 9.2.5. Amid the discussing include talking points on why the decision was made, what it means for the future of World of Warcraft, and how community feedback can shape the further features moving forward. Key takeaway. Cross-faction guilds may be considered in the future, but they want to take it slow and listen to the community feedback. Applying cross-faction gameplay to outdoor content would be a mammoth undertaking due to the way quests are built. The changes are being impaled once at a time in order to avoid having to undo take away of them in the future. Not ruling out the idea of applying in Classic, but unlikely from both technical and dialogical reasons, open to hearing community feedback. Cross-faction grouping is a gameplay change which probably won't be analogical like the story, but factions are currently in an MMO anyway. It's unlikely they do a no all-consuming faction conflict expansion again like BFA. More likely they focus on a wider range of perspectives. And there's more to it. Warcraft isn't just about Alliance versus Horde anymore. Faction war has previously been described as foundation and pillar of World of Warcraft, but orcs versus humans is no longer the world they want to build. Ian Hazakakis had to say. Part of the blog that we put out that laid the foundation of this was about looking at estimations were made about how character progressing should work, about player versus account, and all these other things, and they really revisiting things were said no to the people in the community have asked for, and one of them has been that desire of cross-faction play in some form. The answer had always been, well, it's Warcraft, it's orcs versus humans, it's Horde versus Alliance. It's what defines of our whole IP. That's not the world we want to build, but it's also not the world we really have been building or the story we've been telling for the last 20 years. And going back to Warcraft 3, at the end of the day, it was about the factions coming together to defeat Akamon to stop the major threat to our world. There always been an odd constration that despite being continually told the conflict between Alliance and Horde is central to World of Warcraft, nearly every expansion story has I don't know how to pronounce that word, that narrates. In fact, the focus almost always results in the factions setting aside their difference to defend against a common enemy, most recently in Shadowlands itself, in which players decided themselves to faction against conventions and then spent a lot of time pursuing leaders of the opposite faction. From the mall, even the two-faction war-focused expansion, Mr. Pandera and Battle for Azeroth eventually shifted to teaming up in order to take down Garrosh and the Zoth repeatedly. This theme runs all the way back to Warcraft 3, in which the factions instantly fought one another, but eventually team up to defend the world against Akamon. Ian Hazakakis had to say, it's easy to assume as certain that the core idea is Horde versus Alliance. I think if you go back to Warcraft 1 or Warcraft 2, well then yes, that's literally was the cause, because it was just a two-faction RTS game where the plot was created as a convenience for why these factions are fighting each other. But really, from Warcraft 3 onwards, I think the idea of Warcraft have been advanced exploration, but also the fact that we are actually fundamentally have more in common than what separates us. The Alliance and Horde are both defending their homes, searching for homes, fighting for family, for honor, and for justice. Let's focus on faction wars going forward. It's unlikely they do another all-consuming faction conflict expansion again like BFA. More likely they'll focus on a wide range of perspective. Just want to. Did I? Okay. Yeah. This is part of greeting because while it doesn't mean that the faction war is out of the picture entirely, it feels like they will most likely shift to subgroups. In many ways, this has already been represented in previous Natives arcs. The Forsaken isn't the enemy Grand Apothecary. Putzers is the Horde isn't the enemy. Garrosh is Horde. Players aren't working with the Alliance. They're helping Bronzebeard unravel ancient mysteries likewise, and it doesn't mean that PvP has to go away either, as it's easy to proclaim in the factions are officially in a true of Cold War state, while unofficial conflict between small groups continues to happen. Spore identity without drawing in the book of the faction armies. There are also a lot of those and still left to tie up the falling of Battle of Azeroth and the ramifications of the Fourth War, which have largely been ignored while we've been in the Shadowlands. For example, we have the leaderless and divided Forsaken, who may now turn into Kali Methil, the homeless Night Elves and Gildan survivors of Telesel, and for core wherever might happen to Azeroth after the jailer final encounter. IGN said, but he does think it's unlikely they ever do an all-consuming faction conflict expansion again like Battle for Azeroth. He thinks it's more likely they focus on a wider range of perspectives on the divide through characters and quests such as the survivors of the burning of Telesur, Jen Greyman, members of the Forsaken, and all those in between, all while letting players to decide for themselves where they stand in relation to the opposing faction. Right now, players have been asking for this for a long time, especially as faction imbalance has become increasingly disruptive to divided desires. Someone who loves playing Night Elves has a considerably harder time finding groups and guilds when compared to than someone who is willing to play Horde, partially as they move closer to higher and of competitive gameplay. It's not all that the difference from previous servers restrictions. Either some players may bemoan the loss of server identity, but in a world where Battle.net friends, communications, and Discord have eroded the traditional barriers of communication, being restricted to your server quickly is just a pointless of hindrance. um, Not long ago, we were told that cross-faction play wasn't in the cards. That the division between factions was a pillar of what makes World of Warcraft. But the important part of this change is that you don't need to dissolve factions or the individual stories in order to allow cross-faction gameplay. Some stories may not work as clearly, but most of the majority of Warcraft story beats, such as the Siege of Orgrimmar or the entirety of Legion storylines, would hardly miss a beat. IGN said another big reason the change is happening now is because of how communications outside of World of Warcraft has changed over the years. 17 years ago, has a caucus says people met their online friends and communications through the game, and those through the factions. But increasingly over the years, that's changed radically. It was just kind of one of those accepted rules back then. If you met a friend and you discovered that you play on a different server, oh well, you're never going to get to play with your friend. That's just how WoW is. They whereas those boundaries have increasingly been torn down, and tons of communities have formed, and there are discords and WoW communities and people who are friends on Twitter and other places. The downside of maintaining that hardline grows with each passing year, which frankly probably reached the tipping point a little while ago, but in a game like this, we're stubborn and trajectories, and it's scary to say, let's uproot this foundation pillar of what the game has been for over a decade, but it's time. Future adjustments, cross-faction guilds. Now this is going to be really cool. Cross-faction guilds are being considered, so it might happen in a future expansion or patch. But the team wants to move slowly in order to avoid having to remove any of these changes later on. This is an important consideration, as although cross-realm raiding will be enabled, the current emplacements appear to have several drawbacks compared to more traditional groups, which tend to keep all players in the same guild. Although there are third-party tools which make managing communities of players across different guilds, there's still increased burden when it comes to managing a guild repairs and guild banks, crafting, and even simply lines of communication, and having to invite individual players off a friend list, rather than automatically setting a group to invite to everyone with the raider rank in your guild. Perhaps most importantly, rewards become trickier as well, since things like Hall of Fame titles are actually guild achievements rather than individual ones. IGN had to say, though, as has a cultist suspects they won't have either technical or identical reasons to implement the change in World of Warcraft Classic. He's open to hearing community feedback and reconnecting if the desire is there. And he acknowledged it's possible they may down the line want to consider other elements for the retail version, like cross-faction guilds, but they're being careful about how they move forward. At this point, I know better than to close any doors, as it says. This is a one-way process only. We're not going to lose any rules. Allow social bonds to form or communications to go, and then suddenly turn them back and say, never mind, that was a mistake. Technical considerations aside, something like outdoor gameplay would be a mammoth understanding because of how all of our quests are built. Those considerations aside, we want to be conservative here, but we're going to be listening to our community guide by the results of how this experiment plays out, instead of trying to preserve Alliance and Horde identity, but do so in a way that is harmonious with how the game is played and how our players feel in 2022 and beyond. So that's basically the entire thing of the IGN interview of Ian, of what he had to say. But yeah, what do you guys think of a future expansion or a future patch where we can have cross-faction guilds? That would be really, really cool if that happens in a future expansion or future patch. Now, can you also imagine if they allow cross region, where the US can finally play with all the EU players? Now that'll be another thing that can be tested out in a expansion or like a patch, because then I can invite all my EU people to the guild and play with them without had to make a new character or like a new account. That'd be really cool if that ever happens. But what do you guys think of the cross faction for 9.2.5? Do you guys like it? Do you guys hate it? Do you guys think it's okay? What do you guys think in the comments below? And make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel and give it a thumbs up or like. And make sure you follow me on Twitter at eVideoMaster, and follow me on Facebook at eVideoMaster, and follow me on Twitch at eVideoMaster for more live streaming, and follow me on TikTok. And you can also give me more questions. You can put them in the comments below for a future Q&A video. So anyway guys, I'm going to be signing off, and I'll see you guys next time. See ya!